AP, let's look at our open and close structure root position triad packet. This is 4 pages. For part 1, they want you to basically find the augmented second and augmented fourth intervals, circle them as they are undesirable. So we can look here and see that we have a P4, that's fine, an M2, that's fine, a P4, that's fine, and here is the one where we have an augmented second, an A to a G flat. That's undesirable. Moving on, we have a minor second, certainly fine for a voice to sing, as is a major second. Here's our undesired interval of an augmented second. We want to avoid C to D sharp. And the last one, P4, is allowed. Moving to bass clef, we've got a P4, that's fine. Here's our A4, that's undesirable, but this P5 is okay. And this minor 6 is fine. Number 2, we want to name the melodic interval of each example using abbreviations. The first one is a major second. That's allowed. The second one is not. It's an augmented second, so we would circle that. The third one is a P4. That's fine. And the last one, undesirable, augmented fourth. That's our tritone. We want to avoid that. Okay, let's move down. We should recall these principles for part writing. They want us to write the alto and tenor for the second chord in each case without change in structure. I've already noticed that I've made a mistake in this one right here, which we'll address in a minute. So first what I want to do probably is identify the first chord as either open or closed structure so I know whether or not I want to stay in open or closed structure. So I'll put a C for closed structure. This one will need to be closed. This is closed. Therefore, this one will need to be closed, but right now it appears as if I've written it as open. This one is open, so we'll stay in open. What you want to do next is identify your triads. So you know what to build. And make sure that you have a doubled root, and a third and a fifth. This one I'm going to fix right now. This first chord is in closed structure, DFA. I need to build the second chord in closed structure, so right now it's an open because I can fit a chord tone here. So let me rewrite the soprano, and the alto, and then my tenor would need to sing the D. So that would be the acceptable response for the second measure there. In the third measure, we have GBD in open structure. Second chord, I've changed it. I have not kept it static. And there you have it. Moving over to the next 3 measures. Build your triad. Realize the structure of the first chord for each one. This appears to be closed, closed. Open, so we'll need to write open. And this one appears to be closed, so we'll write it as closed. In each case, make sure that you have doubled the root and provided 1/3 and 1/5. And there you have it. Let's go to page 2. Write the alto and tenor for the second chord in each case. Here is where they want you to change the structure on the second chord. So here the first chord is closed, so we'll need to go to open. In the second measure, we have open, and we'll travel to closed structure. In the third measure, we'll have closed structure traveling to open structure. Over here, in the next set of 3 measures, we have open to close, close to open, open to close. Then you can realize your triads, which I'm not going to do at this point because by this point we should be professionals at this, and just make sure that you've doubled the root in every case. So check your answers to that. Let's move on to number 5. They want us to identify the error in the following examples. So for 5A, there's an error in the second chord, and it's incorrect doubling because we have 3 roots and a third, but a missing fifth. In 5B, the tenor and alto, also known as the inner voices, exceed an octave in the second chord, right there. So that's a voice part error. Number 6, what voice has the common tone in each example? The tenor does, right here, in 6A. In 6B, it's the soprano. And in 6C, it's the tenor. Number 7, when connecting triads whose roots are a fifth or a fourth apart, we already know this, but let's review. We retain the common tone in the same voice and move the remaining voices to the nearest chord tones to achieve correct doubling and spacing. So we'll write the alto and tenor voices for the second chord in each case, and we'll retain the common tone in the same voice. Spell your triads. In each case, the bass is moving by a fifth or a fourth. So we retain the common tone in the same voice and move the remaining voices to the nearest chord tones. So let me highlight our common tone in the soprano, common tone in the tenor, common tone in the alto. And move the other voices to the nearest chord tone. Make sure that you've doubled the root. Check, check, check. More practice. This is page 3. The bass moves by the interval of a fourth. The bass moves by the interval of a fifth. Retain the common tone in the same voice. Move the other voices to the nearest chord tone. Nearest chord tone. Note in this example here you have a figured bass sharp sign, and that's why I needed to include the sharp sign next to the F, making it a D, F sharp, A triad. Go back and make sure that you have doubled the root in all examples. And yet more practice. Keep the common tones in the same voice when the bass is a fourth or a fifth apart. Move the other chord tones to the nearest chord tone. It's always important to look and see how your bass moves so you know what to do to avoid part writing errors. Go back and make sure that you double the root. In these triads. Let's head down to number 8. If, when connecting triads whose roots are a fifth or fourth apart, the common tone is not retained in the same voice, then you'll have to move all the voices to the nearest chord tones, which result in correct doubling and spacing. So now we are not allowed to retain the common tone in the same voice, even though our bass moves by that of a fifth or a fourth. When this happens, you need to double check, triple check that you don't have any parallel fifths or parallel octaves or parallel unisons happening. Okay? So I cannot retain the common tone here. So hopefully you did pretty okay with this. It should look like mine. And here we have a figured bass of a flat 5, and that's why I needed to include the B flat here. Also, keep in mind that if my root is E flat, my root must be doubled as an E flat. I can't just leave the altos singing in E, I need to draw the flat sign in. Very important. But more often than not, you'll have a key signature, and you'll have an E flat in the key signature, so you won't have to be bothered with that. So there are no common tones to highlight, but I've simply kept smooth voice leading by moving all of the chord tones to the nearest chord tone in the next chord. And notice when I do this, there's really no voice that's moving more than an interval of a third, which is ideal. Let's head on to page 4. Just some more practice examples where we have the bass that moves by that of a fifth or a fourth, yet we're not going to keep the same common tones in the same voice. Notice in the second measure here, I have a sharp 5, so I need to make sure I include that F sharp. Very important. And in the last measure, like the example before in B flat, in E flat rather, I have a B flat, so that's the root that needs to be doubled as a B flat. So don't forget to include your flat sign in the alto voice there. For number 9, they would like closed structure for all the chords, and we need to supply the alto and tenor voices because the bass and soprano are given to us. Note our key signature of B flat. Identify your triads. Provide your Roman numerals. Make sure that they are capital or lowercase depending on the quality. These are root position triads. Does not specify that we need to not retain the voices, those common tones in the same voice. So we are going to retain them. Look at your bass motion. Moves by a fifth or a fourth. Retain the common tone. 5 chord to the 1 chord, the bass moves by a fourth. Retain the common tone. 1 chord to the 5 chord, bass moves by a fifth or a fourth. Retain the common tone. 5 chord to a 1 chord, bass moves by a fourth or fifth. Retain the common tone. Let me highlight the common tones from chord to chord. Tenor will retain it. Tenor will retain it. Tenor will retain it. And the other voices will move to the nearest chord tone to complete the triad. In each case, make sure that you have doubled the root and have a third and a fifth. All of these are in close structure. Now, for the second part of question 9, we need to use open structure for all chords. And of course, we're in a different key. Now we're in the key of G major. Recognize your triads. Supply your Roman numerals. The 1 chord to the 4 chord. The 4 chord to the 1 chord, the 1 chord to the 4 chord, the 4 chord to the 1 chord. All of these chord progressions in this example move by that of a fifth or a fourth in the bass, which means you can retain common tones, one common tone, and the others can move to the nearest common tone. Let's see where I put the common tones. From chord 1 to chord 2, I've kept it in alto. From chord 2 to chord 3, I've also kept it in alto. Here, we can't retain a common tone because of the soprano line. But from the second to last chord to the last chord, we can retain the common tone there. Notice too that all of these chords I have here are in open spacing, which is what the directions provide. And I'll put my chord dots in so you can see that. If I look at each voice part line individually, I can see very nice smooth voice leading here, with only the biggest interval being that of a third. That the tenors sing. Keep in mind, the bass can do whatever they want, pretty much. If they're singing roots, they can have bigger leaps than the upper voices can. The next one, we are using closed structure for all chords. Note the key of A minor. Figure out your triads. Supply the Roman numerals. Be careful of the quality. We have a major 5 here because of our sharp sign, so I need to make sure that I raise the third note above the bass, 1 semitone. Bass moves by that of a fourth or a fifth. In all of this, which means I can retain 1 common tone in the same voice. From the first chord to the second chord, I've kept it in the alto. From the second chord to the third chord, I've also kept it in the alto. Okay, now from this 1 chord to this 5 chord, I kept the common tone in the tenor. Go back. Make sure that you have correct doubling of the root in all chords. Look at each voice line independently and see how smooth it is. Of course, double check all your other rules, like no voice crossing, upper three voices no further than an octave apart from each other adjacently, and so on and so forth. Compare each voice, soprano, alto, soprano, tenor, soprano, bass, alto, tenor, alto, bass, tenor, bass, and make sure that you have no perfect unisons, perfect fifths, perfect octaves. And there you have it. Thanks for watching, AP. I hope that some of this is helping.